So, all right, yeah. So it is October the 16th, and we are still talking about the Roaring Twenties. So, remember last time we were talking about Charles Lindbergh and his flight across the Atlantic Ocean, and we were talking about the Harlem Renaissance. And yeah, hey, I've seen a few of them. They're pretty good.
cool.
They are. They are. I mean, I don't know anything about basketball, but I'm sure they're good at it. All right. So
They're really good at doing like trick shots.
yeah,
They
yeah.
can like spin the ball and make it go from this hand to this hand, like down their arm, behind their neck, behind their head. They can like spin it around their neck.
Yeah, I remember when I've seen a few of them. Yeah, they were like calling kids on like under the court, and they were like doing like weird stuff.
Yeah, they can do some pretty cool stuff.
But yeah, I was probably like in middle school. Yeah, that was a lot. Hey, anyways, here's a painting from inspired by jazz and Harlem art at the time. So, like we said last time, the Harlem Renaissance had to do with literature, music, poetry, the visual arts, such as paint. It would also inspire even the theater as well, classical music. So it was one of those things that really, really, really crossed the color boundaries, especially jazz. Yeah. So built on the foundations of blues and ragtime, jazz began in the South, particularly New Orleans, and made a national sensation around 1917. As jazz spread up north, it drew in audiences across America and across the races. It even influenced custom music, as found in George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue and in American in Paris. Not bad songs. Illegal bars, often called speakeasies, there's that word, allowed patrons to listen to jazz, to dance, consume liquor, and stuff like that. And according to Logan, get alcohol poisoning or poisoning of other methods and die, because a lot of times this stuff. No, because often, since the stuff was made illegally, it was made by people who didn't really care about consequences in the first place. So if they used things that were unhealthy, they weren't that concerned. If it was made through unsanitary methods, again, not very concerned. And so you still find this kind of country today with like bootlegging. In January 1920, the 18th Amendment prohibition came into full effect, outlawing most forms of drinking alcohol. Now, there were still some around for like wines for religious services and stuff like that. There were different kinds of alcohols which are used for like cleaning solvents and, of course, for different kinds of manufacturing. But recreational alcohol was illegal. Though prohibition was meant to make America a more moral and traditional society, it often had the opposite effects. Not too long after it came into effect, like senators and congressmen still had their own personal bars in their houses. Police officers and everyday people still drank. They just didn't do it in the open. It kind of shifted from being like a lower class activity to a higher class activity, because all of a sudden people said it kind of like had a cool effect. It's going to, of course, out in the country is where you're going to see a lot of moonshiners with their distilleries, where they're going to make illegal alcohol and dispense it from there. There will be smuggling from Canada and places like that to bring in alcohol. So it was one of those things that people were very enthusiastic about at first. And then I guess they kind of got, we can't live by this. And so they did. What's peculiar, you might want to think about, is that it took a constitutional amendment to outlaw alcohol. However, there are many things that are outlawed today that weren't outlawed by a constitutional amendment. And that's something we're going to examine later on, especially when we talk about like the war on drugs and stuff like that when we get to the 80s. So keep that in mind. All right, let's move on to the next one. Hey, who are these guys? Who do you think?
They kind of remind me of the Backstreet Boys.
All right, so they're like the Backstreet Boys of their day? Nah.
No.
What about this guy? He served time in Alcatraz. He's a gangster. It's Al Capone. Al Capone. So, so organized crime is going to start taking off in different segments of America. And so, like, the Italian mafia is going to fill in one of those roles. And the Italian mafia actually started in Italy, not having anything to do with drugs or alcohol. They actually were a network of families that controlled like aqueducts and water flows to cities. And it became very kind of corrupt and stuff like that. So, and of course, mobs do more things than simply like deal with illegal substances. They also do things like exploit people for money and things like that. So as time went on, prohibition became more unpopular with voters. Though it would be revoked with the 21st Amendment in 1933, by 1926, only 19% of Americans supported prohibition. So it had enough national support to make a constitutional change, but we'll see that as we see here, it tapered off rather quickly. And a lot of this had to do with Americans as a culture had a lot of long-standing traditions that had to do with alcohol for different functions and recreation and stuff like that. And some of it has to do with the fact that a lot of people were immigrated, or at least their ancestors immigrated from places that had a lot to do with drinking, such as England and Germany, places like that. The 18th Amendment did decrease the amount of fatal alcoholism and public drunkenness, however. So it did have a public health bonus, right? So it did work for that. Prohibition shut down the old social centers for the lower and working class in the saloons. Saloons, if you remember, those were places where a lot of times when we go after work, a saloon would be a rather large building. It would have like a gym, a barber, a bar. They'd get entertainment. It was also a brothel and stuff like that. And so you'd have a lot of problems with working class men going down there instead of being dads and husbands and stuff. And promoted the middle upper class speakeasy. So especially with like jazz and dancing and fashion and stuff like that, speakeasies became a place where it was more for people with money. Bootlegging became rampant and nearly unenforceable for the law as they had little money or resources. So law enforcement wasn't ready to regulate such a big change within commerce in America. Law enforcement before this time was more to do with such as violent crimes and theft, not necessarily controlling substances. So the infrastructure of America wasn't ready. Organized crime exploded as gangs such as Al Capone's in Chicago made millions in illegal alcohol, gambling, prostitution, and racketeering. Many politicians and unions quickly became controlled by gang dollars. And so, I mean, it's simple supply and demand. If people want a product, somebody is going to chase that profit because they figure it's going to be worth the risk. And this is what happened with the banning of alcohol. If only 19% of Americans didn't support it, it tells you that there's a lot of Americans who wanted it even by illegal means. And so these people like this were more than willing to do it. However, their hands weren't clean. They were also doing other things as well, as we see that were very illegal. Um, Sometimes they got into turf wars and they murdered one another. And this would go in the newspapers, just machine gunning one another down with Thompson machine guns and stuff like that. It's going to become quite an ordeal. A lot of Americans panicked too because a lot of them were Italian. And Americans didn't have a very favorable view of Italians across the country at this time. So,
How did how did Al Capone die?
he died in prison. Yeah, he would spend the rest of his life in Alcatraz. And they caught him for something like funny, like he didn't pay his taxes or something like that. He was very good at covering up his crimes. But they caught him, I think, on tax evasion. He didn't pay enough in taxes on property or something like that. So they
Like,
threw him in
well,
prison.
You didn't pay enough on your property, so just like any normal, citizen, we're gonna send you to Alcatraz.
Well, yeah. Well, they knew, he was behind all this murder and theft and smuggling and all this other
They
stuff.
just couldn't prove it, so they put him in a high security prison.
Yep, they got him for what they could. And this is going to be the birth of federal law enforcement as a really bigger deal. We know that there has been federal law enforcement before this time, like the Secret Service, which had to do with protecting the president and also stopping counterfeiting of money, right? And the U.S. Marshal Service, I believe, was already around too. But now you guys start seeing the FBI and stuff. Yeah.
It won't take very long.
Ooh.
Can I see when, and where I'm supposed to go?
Sounds important.
Only 19% of Americans supported prohibition. That should have been revoked way earlier than 1933.
It takes time to have a constitutional amendment go through that process, though.
81% of Americans
No,
was not cool.
Yeah, and of course,
Because it led to other worse things.
yeah, and that was the problem. And of course, you could think people make the same argument about certain things today, right or wrong. But the thing is about alcohol is it had a big cultural thing going on in America. So, you ready to move on?
No.
Sweet. All right. Now you're ahead of the other class. Cool.
Yay.
Hey, this is somebody we're going to talk about now. This is Harding. And so we're going to see some of the things that he's going to help bring about during the 20s. So Harding was elected in Warren G. Harding was elected in 1920 and took office after President Wilson.
Wait. That was a president?
That was a president.
I've never heard of him in my life.
Yeah, he's not the most memorable guy, but he is going to die and bring in a really great president later. Let me freeze this and edit it. Looks like half that part of that word's not there. All right, so can't stand it when it doesn't cover all the words. It's because it used to be a PowerPoint, and then I made it to a Google slide, and it doesn't like changes. Yeah, so known for being a charismatic socialite, he was loved by politicians and the media alike, until stories of political corruption regarding his cabinet surfaced. As a political party man, Harding gave hundreds of jobs to political supporters, regardless of their abilities. So we're seeing a complete reversal of the changes in the civil service reform that was supposed to be going on in America. It was supposed to be, the changes were supposed to make it more of a meritocracy. The best person gets the right job.
Is that like based on our like country's name?
No, meritocracy comes from merit.
Oh, meritocracy.
Meritocracy,
He
not
was giving
meritocracy.
I was like, there's no way they would do
Yeah,
that.
not a meritocracy. Oh, I can't say I can. I already said it.
Meritocracy.
Meritocracy.
But it is very American. So yeah, he's giving jobs to his buddies. He's not rocking a lot of boats. He's also going to have a really huge scandal that's going to surface during and after his presidency that has to do with millions of dollars being taken away from veterans hospitals, right? So like a lot of World War I veterans come back crippled and really messed up, and you're going to have some of his corrupt appointees basically just pocket the money instead of caring for the veterans. So that's going to make the country pretty mad. It's also going to have a scandal, I think, with an illegitimate child. If that was Harding, I'll take that one back. When the scandals came to light, Harding decided to address these issues on his return from his vacation to Alaska.
Wow.
However, on his return trip, he suffered a blood vessel burst in his brain. We call that an aneurysm.
Oh, how good.
And he died on August the 2nd, 1923. After his death, Vice President Calvin Coolidge became the 30th president.
That's why nobody knows about him, because he died early.
Yeah, he's going to die, and he's still dead today. And yeah, he's mostly known for having a really bad administration that kind of brings back the old late 1900 days of political corruption and party politics. Coolidge is going to come in. He's going to be a very austere New England farmer. He's going to be top of his class, and he's going to become a very successful attorney and mayor. And he's a very by the book guy, but he's also a hands-off guy. And he's going to while he's helping out his parents with their farm, when he's visiting his parents as vice president, he's going to find out about Harding's death, and his own dad's going to swear him as president with their family Bible. And then the next thing you know, he's got to hop a train, go back to Washington. Coolidge.
Oh.
I was talking about Coolidge. So yeah, they're going to find out about the president's death.
So why was he next in line? Because he was vice president?
Vice president, yeah,
The president dies.
I knew that.
Vice president becomes
30th president. So.
So how do you remember all of this?
Oh, a couple years ago, I read a biography about Calvin Coolidge by an author called
Was it good?
Emily Schley. It was okay, but gosh, it was like 900 pages. I was kind of like, I didn't want a book this big about this guy, but it was a good book. It wasn't entertaining though, right? But it was really informative. Like I'm reading a book now that's kind of entertaining, kind of informative. But I just can't get through it fast enough.
What is that book?
Oh, it's
Is it about
Is it the one
something?
you're
It's about
saying?
something Russian or German?
no China. It's
Oh,
about
no.
the tragedy of liberation. It's about it's mostly been about how the Chinese after the Maoist revolution would just totally just destroy its own people, and struggle sessions and stuff like that, where people would have to publicly write and denounce all of their past crimes that used to be things that were okay and good, and they essentially have to destroy their own identities in order to live in a communist utopia. And so everything about them would have to be destroyed so they could build themselves up as a new person. It was very self-destructive. And about like Christians being put in concentration camps and things like that.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, that's communism. I don't know. I'm going to read a professional book next on my list, and then I'm going to read another book by a French guy. So let's see if that works out.
A professional book and then another book by a French
What do you mean?
Like an education book, like like a book for my job, right? So.
I read for work sometimes.
It's good for you. It's good for you. When I was in the army, I'd read for work sometimes. I'd read FM's field manuals, something that was boring, but at least I did my job. So it's good to do. All right, you ready to move on? So, I mean, when you're in college, you should get to. Here's one of the scandals we were talking about with Harding. It was the Teapot Dome scandal. And it's going to have to do with bribery from oil companies to politicians. And this happens every now and again. You turn on the news here and there, and you might see that one politician or another has accepted bribes, and it's supposed to be not good. So, to this day. So let's see a little bit about this. So the Teapot Dome scandal. Following Harding's death, the media took off the stories regarding the corruption found in the Harding administration. His Secretary of the Interior, Albert Fall, accepted huge bribes from oil companies for leases on federal oil reserves at Teapot Dome, Wyoming, and Elk Hills, California. So these oil reserves were supposed to be there for emergencies, and they were supposed to be there in case we needed them for the military in times of war. However, certain oil companies were given permission, as long as they paid enough, to drill there. So it's a national security issue and it's a corruption issue. So it was a really big deal. The Attorney General, that's the top lawyer for the entire country, Harry Doherty, I think it's actually his name, and others accepted bribes as well in order to illegally sell government property for huge discounts. Even the head of the Veterans Bureau stole more than $200 million, and that's back then money. So that is a massive amount of federal cash when the federal government wasn't that big like it is today. So much.
$200 million in 1920 something.
Mhm.
Did he get like all that taken away?
I don't know. I think he actually shot himself.
So that got given to his kids.
No, the courts definitely got the money back, but still, sometimes the money vanishes because it's so fungible. You can't always trace dollars, especially pre-electronic dollars. Like that's a tough one. Who knows what kind of assets people could hide?
Yeah, it's crazy. You could know like somebody and they could just be like incredibly stupidly rich. And if they didn't live incredibly stupidly rich, you never know.
Well, sometimes there's stories about bag ladies who they pass on, and then when they was like, oh, she had an apartment, they check it, there's just stacks of money in here. It's like crazy. By the end of it all, 3 cabinet members resigned, 4 men went to jail, and 5 others committed suicide. Even Harding's mistress claimed that she bore the president's love child. So even Harding was found, I was right, to have a love affair and all this other stuff. So it's just like, wow, everything was wrong. And that's back then too. So like even today, if we found out the president having an affair, it makes the news and people get pretty upset about it. So back then, people got very upset about it.
Have we ever
I think
had
it's
a
funny.
single president?
I think it's funny that we
Yes.
keep the president to like Bible standards when the rest of the world is like, no, let's not do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it goes to show that Americans do want to have a moral background, generally speaking. But where that moral compass is can kind of shift a little here and there. We have had a single president. He was a widower. I forgot his name.
President that's never been married.
Off the top of my head, no, I don't think so.
Oh.
Yeah, we've had a widower president. I don't remember who it was.
Okay,
It was
well,
before this time.
have we ever had a single president?
Yes, we've had 4
James
presidents.
Buchanan.
Buchanan, okay, yeah.
Google's smarter than me. She wouldn't go, yeah, we actually have had 50 presidents.
45.
What?
We're on 45 right
We're on 58 right now, actually. You just don't know about all the secret presidents.
Oh, okay.
All right, so there's all this stuff. A lot of people getting very cynical about the federal government, and also you're having a lot of issues too. Like a lot of veterans from World War I are demanding some kind of, they're demanding pensions for fighting the war. The same thing happened after the Civil War. You have a lot of veterans go to the White House and protest because a lot of them are in very bad financial straits, and they're demanding that the federal government give them some kind of bonus or something, right? And so this is all happening this time too. So a lot of people were pretty upset with the Fed.
How much did it cost to send out the COVID-19 checks?
So trillions of dollars. If you look at the amount of spending we've done in just the past years, blown prior years out of the water. So
Okay, cool. What has the U.S. spent in the last year? During year 2019, the federal government spent 4.45 trillion.
okay, this year's probably definitely blew that out. But they're trying to do another stimulus thing, I think, but it probably won't happen until after the election.
Yeah.
My guess. It's my guess. Hey, let's go ahead and go on to the next one. Y'all ready? Okay, wait. Wait, your head's hurting. Why? Oh, your hand's hurting? Oh, it sounds like you're running.
You could just type. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
You learn better when you don't type. Yeah, so you learn better when you don't.
Ooh.
I don't know.
Yeah, I want to go at least until 2, so it's until
Wait, 2?
50,
When do we get out of this class? 10,
22, 25. Yeah, not 10, not 10.
10,
Okay.
25.
I gotta do a Zoom meeting thing at 3:45, and then another one.
too.
You got you too. So,
Oh, I think I lost my NHS.
and
I have it.
You have one?
did another one on Monday apparently.
Thank you.
What is that?
Mhm.
Is it like a coloring box?
Of sorts.
That's
We've got our stuff.
Although we actually have an art class.
Yeah, right. Y'all been waiting for years. All right, next one. All right, so President 30, Calvin Coolidge. Already told you a little bit about him, but his political philosophy is going to be very about the idea of individual liberty. So, federal government step back and allow individuals to make decisions based on finances, economic decisions, and personal choice. But he's also going to be kind of like a law and order guy too. He was not going to be afraid to use the police to crack down on, say, like riots and stuff like that. He put down quite a few riots, and that's actually how he rose to fame. So Coolidge was perhaps the polar opposite of his boss, Harding. He was to himself a man of few words, very hardworking, intelligent, and did not tolerate dishonesty. Ideologically, Coolidge believed that the president must not become more powerful than the founders intended. He also felt that the federal government had overreached its authority and regulations. Especially decisions that should be left to the states, right? As a laissez-faire minded man, that means just let it be. He also believed that market forces could both improve the economy while ensuring that the consumer safety would still be maintained. In 1924, he decided to run for election as president for the Republican nominee. So remember, he's going to become president because his boss is assassinated, but then he will run as president on his own steam afterwards. So Coolidge is part of the reason why the Roaring 20s were so such a time of success. It's because he kind of allowed industrialists to have some breathing room in order to build more factories, open up more markets, sell more products, and for people to have more jobs, for more spending cash, and all of that.
You believe that the government had its fingers in too many pies?
Yeah, and people are really going to be on board with this too, who weren't otherwise in prior the generation before this, because they're going to see all the corruption. And they're like, well, I guess we don't want to have this much power in these people's hands after all. because they're pocketing the money and they're selling federal resources. So he wasn't terribly too popular as a person though, because even when he gave public speeches, they were very short, to the point. He just wasn't a people person. He was a workaholic though, and I don't know. People said he was like the most boring human being in the world, but apparently he did his job well, is what they said.
Could both improve?
Let me see where we're at on this.
What does laissez-faire mean?
Laissez-faire, I think means, I think it means like let it be in French. Like laissez-faire economics is essentially just full on capitalism, like no government interference. You allow consumers and businesses to essentially run on their own. We're almost done with this little mini unit. So yeah, what I think I'm gonna do is we're gonna come back on Wednesday. We're gonna finish this unit. It's just gonna come. I mean, Monday, right? Yeah, Monday, yeah. And I'm so, and we're gonna have, I think we're gonna have our midterm on Wednesday. And it's essentially gonna be over World War I and the 20s. And then our third test will be over the Great Depression and World War II. And then our final test will just be all that last stuff, like Cold War and modern stuff. Then Christmas break. Yes, and if you want to. So yeah, we can do a little review on Monday. Oh, okay. Hey, let's do one more slide when y'all are ready, and then that'll cut it for today. And then we'll check out a video or something like that. You ready? Huh? No? Okay. Hey, so here we go. There's President signing some law into law. I don't know which one. But it's a picture. So everybody's so happy.
Do you know which president?
Well, yeah, we just talked about it. That's Coolidge still.
No, I don't believe you now.
Okay. All right. So in 1924, Coolidge had a landslide victory versus both Democrat and the Progressive Party candidate. So the Bull Moose Party was still around, but it wasn't that big. As president, he slashed the size of the federal government and greatly eased federal regulation of businesses. He was not afraid to veto bills. Y'all remember what a veto is? That's with the president.
When something goes, it's like, yes, and then it's him, and he's like, no.
That's right. So that's part of our checks and balances. The president can say, since the president is supposed to represent voters from across the nation, can have the final say so whether a law can become law or not. That he saw as unconstitutional increase in size of federal government, such as the McNary-Hugen bill, which would have allowed the Fed to buy surplus produce from farmers and sell them to foreign nations at their behest. So he's like, the federal government has no business. He's like, I understand farmers aren't doing all that well. The federal government has no business buying things from farmers if the farmer can't sell their things. So they weren't too happy about that, but it was seen as a way to kind of like artificially manipulate the market and to do something that the Constitution didn't outline. The Secretary of Treasury, Andrew Melton, was often called the greatest Secretary of Treasury since Alexander Hamilton, and fought to cut taxes on successful business owners in order to promote investment. So here we're going to see across the nation, business taxes are going to be slashed. And one thing that they're going to find by cutting business taxes and by cutting taxes to wealthy individuals, people are going to stop hiding their wealth. Because whenever you raise taxes, Thomas Sowell talks about this. He's a famous economist, and he studied this period. Whenever they had high taxes for wealthy individuals and businesses, they often put their money in foreign banks and hid it so it wasn't taxable. Whenever Andrew Melton saw that these taxes were cut, they brought the taxes back to America, or the cash back to America, invested it, and though they weren't taxed as much as a percentage-wise on top, there was more entities to collect taxes from, so they actually had more money for the federal government. So they found, wow, if we don't charge people as much, more people are honest about paying us. So it's kind of a strange thing.
It's crazy to think that Alexander Hamilton was like one of the best.
Well, he founded so much that wasn't there.
Yeah. He created the federal bank.
He's not my favorite founding father. That would be Madison, but especially when you look at the Federalist Papers. The fact that Madison is like essentially the guy who made the Constitution. Everybody else just kind of had some buy-in to it. But he's the one.
Well, Hamilton wrote the most Federalist Papers.
He did, but I wouldn't say he wrote the best. No offense to Hamilton.
I remember reading some in your class in 7th grade.
Yeah, next semester we're going to go over a couple of them. There's probably like 3, I think. Like Federalist 10's the top, and a couple more as our primary source stuff. I did order us a book for this class, and that's going to be more for the Cold War. It's a short, like 100, 120 page book over Russian gulags and stuff like that.
Yay!
It's not supposed to be too bad. I like the author, but I haven't read this book yet. I have read a couple of books by the author before that, so it'll be good stuff.
As long as it's not about as long as it's not a biography, I'm down.
It's like a biography of a fictional person going through things that the author actually went through.
That's cool.
So
Oh, so the author actually went through this thing. That's
yeah,
like,
he lived through it all, but he couldn't quite publish things as a nonfiction because then he could risk going to prison again and not coming out this time. It's because Soviets had complete control over propaganda about their nation. And if you said anything that was against the official messaging, even if it was true, you could wind up being disappeared because you're now
Even if you were like in America?
Well, he wasn't in America at that time. He will eventually immigrate from Soviet Union and get out of there, but it's going to take time because it's, as the 20th century progressed, some restrictions were taken away here and here and here, but some were not. Hey folks, that's going to end our lecture for today. So we're going to come back next Monday and we're going to finish up this little unit on the 20s, and then we're going to have a midterm. So we'll talk about that later.